Welcome, this is Chris from Christoph Joseph Leather, but we're not doing leather crafting today, we're doing woodworking. So we're going to be talking about Mortise and Tenon Joints, and I have a custom Craftsman style sofa that I built, and we are going to take a look at it and how I made those joints. Let's get into it. Anyways, I'm Chris again here at Christoph Joseph, where I primarily do leather crafting, but no, we're going to talk about woodworking today. And what is that? We're going to be talking about Mortise and Tenon Joints, how to do it really easy using your basic shop equipment that's pretty much standard, your table saw, a router, a plunge router is preferred with the bottom cutter, and a bandsaw like I got right here, this big monster. And chop saw for cutting your lengths, a chisel for cleaning up your corners, and a hammer and mallet, whatever. And every carpenter should have a tape measure, so you'll need that to lay out your joints and stuff. But anyways, you know, I've been doing woodworking for 30 years, been doing the leather crafting for 5. So every now and then I want to mix it up a little bit, you know, give you guys a little snippet into my other world, which is woodworking. And so I built this beautiful Craftsman style sofa that's going to have a leather cushion on it, and it has some really cool Mortise and Tenon joints with the pass-through tenon that sticks out the armrest and stuff like that, kind of a traditional look. And I just wanted to give you guys some pointers how to do it, and hopefully you guys will get something out of this video. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button, and if you like the video, smash that like button. Alright, let's get into this video. Alright, so here's the bench that we're going to be talking about, and this is white oak, and obviously it's going to get some color to it. Kind of a traditional color for the era, Craftsman style, stickly, you know, style piece. And so we're going to be talking about how we made these little guys right there. Big, thick 3.5-inch legs, popping through. Got the slats, these are all mortised in. Same with these slats in the back, they're mortised in the top piece. You know, these are Mortise and Tenon into the legs, every which way. And it can be done really easily, like I said, on the machines that I'm going to be showing you guys how to use them, how to do it. And so let's get into more how this thing went together. All right. So what I got is some leg blocks here. One leg block, one example of one that I'm doing mortises in, okay? And basically how I did this was with a router, plunge router, and I made myself a little jig with a rub collar, and laid out where they're going, you know, a specific size, so the stringer can go in there, and then just come back and clean it up with a chisel. And here at the top where the armrest comes down, you know, these tenons are going to protrude out to like a stickly style feature, and which we got right here. You can see that. So if you don't have a mortising machine, you can see this is a problem. You know, how am I going to make that? So basically how I made this was I split the board on the table saw and rejoined both edges. And I came over to the bandsaw and I cut out this notch. It's that simple. So that's a simple way to do, you know, a mortise right there, a pass-through, is to, and you don't even see, if you're cutting out of the same board, you're not going to really see it when you glue it back together, you know. Easy, super easy. And you can even do this on the table saw, you know, with a cross-cut jig, and just make a bunch of passes and boom, you got a nice equal tenon. So that was that. And so let's talk about a few other things. All right, so here we are. I'm mocking it up a little bit. As you can see, my legs are going to pop up through there. I still need to sand and file them, so they're too tight right now, and I don't want to risk the chance of not being able to get them out, because that's how snug they are going to be. So this is just a mock-up, but as you can see, there's my armrest. Big chunky thing, man. It's just going to be beautiful. It's 2 1/4 thick by 6 inches wide. Going to have my 3/4 by 2 1/4 slots on the bottom. You know, and there's going to be my side stringer that flows around even with my front stringer. And these aren't 1 3/4. I got these at 1 1/4 thickness, my apron stretchers. And my tenons are about 1 3/8. Nice size. Leg blocks are 3 1/2 by 3 1/2. And it's going to be a beautiful piece. Okay. All right. So excuse the mess. We're over here at the table saw, and you know, we were using this for production, and today we're off. So I'm doing some demonstrations here. So basically, to do the tenon on your stretcher pieces on your boards, there's a couple ways to go about it. You can have a dado set where it takes off more material in one pass, or if you just got a regular 1/8 inch wide blade, you could do it 2 ways. Set up your fence. Okay, I want to go in 1 inch, you know, for your tenon. So I'm setting 1 inch to the outside of my blade. Say I want to go 1/4 inch deep, so I just got it set up for 1/4 inch deep, and you just use your cross cut slide right here. And that's the safe way. You just make a bunch of passes, flip the board, do the other side. And then you also want to do this direction, so the same thing, you turn the board up this way, and you make several passes. Here, let's turn on. So just in a matter of seconds, you can start knocking that down, and boom, you got your tenon. Now the other way is a little more tricky, especially if you have a really narrow apron piece or stretcher, is you got to stand it up. This is the other way to do it. You raise the blade up higher, but you know, it depends on the throat. You might have a big throat and it's hard to do it. It's a little dangerous, you know, if you're a beginner. So, you know, you're going to make a couple passes going this way, you turn it. You always want the same setting for both sides, so you just flip the board, and it's equal every time. So that's one way. To make it a little more safe, you in 2 seconds you come up a little jig like this, okay? If you can see this here, see how I did that? This is for my slats, so they go in. These slats have a radius, so I don't want to see the radius as it goes down into the tenon, so I'm doing a partial rabbet there, and I'll show you in a minute. So to make it safe, you know, you get your clamp, clamp it on, and now this is really safe, you know. It helps you keep it straight up and down like that, right? So you're not doing that, you know. So then you just take it out and put it in your next part, especially if you got a whole bunch of them. You're flipping around and you're kind of riding off the top edge of this, keeping it nice and square, you know. So that's a trick I learned. I'm doing tenons on the table. All right, so what I'm using here is a Porter cable plunge router, and there's the rub collar for my jig. So basically, whatever your mortise size is, you got to calculate how much more this rub collar eats up when you're making your jig. So say you got a 3/4 by 3 inch mortise, you know, you just calculate your pattern, and you make yourself a pattern for your thing. And I think I got one. Here we go. We got one right here. So I just clamp it on down, And you know, I got my marks where I want to line up at. Boom, put my jig over it, drop the router down over it, and I do a few passes. The reason being is what happens is when you're doing something, a plunge, a lot of the wood chips get built up inside of here. You got to blow it out, then you got to go do some more, then you got to blow it out. So it's a process, but it's a whole lot better than having to chisel the whole entire thing, you know. So I just come back with like a 1/2 inch chisel or a 3/4, depending on how big it is, and I do those corners. Another good tip, very important tip, whenever I'm doing any kind of chiseling for like hardware and mortises and carving, I always take a brush with some mineral spirits and I dab it over. This is an old school trick that wood carvers have taught me. So, you know, I just get a little, you know, one of those cheap disposable brushes and get yourself like a little bottle cap or something and put a little mineral spirits there, and just it moistens it up and makes for a much smoother cut, kind of lubricates it, you know, and you get much cleaner cuts chiseling than doing it dry. Like I used to do wood carving too. So very helpful tip. All right, so we're going to do a quick demonstration on the routing here with the plunge router, and it's a right setup to make sure, you know, that I want my bit kind of just shy of this to start with, because you only get so much travel, you know, so you got to make sure everything's set up just right, and you got a stopper to right here to adjust the depth. You know, I'm going in 1 1/16 because my tenons are going to be 1 inch, and I don't want it. I want my joints to fit snug, pressed right up against her. You know, I don't want it to bottom out before it clamps up. So here we go. Got my router set up, and I just threw this together. Normally I would use like a multi-ply for patterns. They're really durable, but you know, this is what I had available without digging through stuff. So I got it clamped. Make sure your clamps are out of the way of your router base. That's very important. And so I'm clamping the jig to the leg and the leg to the table. You want a nice thick workbench too, you know, none of this chintzy stuff. This bench is about 2 1/4 thick, 3 layers. So, and like my other workbench that I do my leather crafting on is, it's an old bowling lane made out of butcher block maple. So you got it nice and secure. Good idea to have some safety goggles. All right, so let's do a little test right now. We'll fire up the router. I kind of want to set it in there first and get it rested up against one edge. Making sure everything's good and tight. I got the shield facing me so less debris is going out. And this is my lever that I release that lets it go down. And then when you unrelease the thing, it locks it. Whatever it does. Say you want to do a half pass. There you go. You lock it in. So let's fire it up. I bring it back to where I started usually, and I always like to just tip my machine out, you know, kind of like that. So there's an example witnessing how it's done right there, even though I wasn't really cutting because the tenon was alright, the mortise was already done. So, and it's really fast, you know, if you got your lines transferred all the way around your leg, and you got to be so careful about your placement of your mortises, you know, your show face, this side going this way, this side going that way, you know, you got to make sure your orientation is just right based on what you want to see on your leg. So location is important, you know, but having them all at the same height, just transfer your lines around the leg, do a little X where you're going to do your thing, drop your pattern down in, boom, 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 and then come back and just chisel out the corners. And it's super easy. You didn't need to have, you know, if you don't have that expensive, boring mortising machine, this is the way to go. test fit on my joints. I've got them all dialed in. You know, I took a nice sanding block that you can get real close up to the corner. Sometimes you use a file or a rabbet plane, and you really want to have the perfect fit. You know, you don't want them too sloppy. It should be nice and snug. So snug that you can pick up the piece and it's not going to fall out like that. Alright, so there you go. There's a perfect mortise and tenon joint done with just your basic shop equipment. Router, chisel, table saw. So nothing fancy, but it works. Alright, so let's back out right here. So here's my front stretcher piece that's going to go across my sofa. And you can see I got a whole bunch of mortises going on right here. And to make it simple, here, let me grab a, so you can kind of see what's going on. This is what the cushion's going to sit on right here. Look at that. You know, these are going to fit inside of these. But it would have been a pain in the butt to do all this manually. So what you do is you cut out a groove on the table saw, and you get a matching piece of oak, and you mill down some blocks, and you go on down the row. You figure out your spacing, and you put in a filler block, put in one of your slats as a spacer, next block, and on, so boom, 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 boom. So now you got mortise and tenon sofa stretchers. Or, you know, let's say you're building a bed and you got some slats in the back for your headboard. It's the same principle, and I'll show you that in a minute. So you can see I got this mortise and tenon inside the leg block mocked up right here. So let's talk about some other stuff. Okay, so here's the example I was showing you guys about if you have a radius part and you want to tenon it in. Same thing. Here, I did a groove on the table saw, and this is going to be for the back, you know, where you sit your backrest. And there's going to be a bunch of these slats, you know, nice and snug. You don't want them too loose, you know, or too tight either. So I got them all numbered, you know, so which ones go where. But those go in there like that. Same thing, I filled in these little spots, and you come through with a belt sander and sand it all nice and smooth. And it's a dark stain, so it's all going to go away. You're not even going to be able to tell that I backfilled these in with wood blocks. So let's just show you what I got going on. Let's put one over here, one down here maybe. So this is my top. The armrest kind of comes around the back with a big 2 1/4 piece. This log right here weighs about 60 pounds, and it's white oak, very popular. So these are going to go in. It's going to be angular. The backrest is going to be a bunch of slats, equally spaced. I think these are 2 1/4, 3 inch space in between, just to minimize how many of them there are. I think I got a dozen that span across this, and they're lined up with the slats underneath the sofa, and it's going to be really cool. And got an oak table I'm working on. I got a whole stack of 8/4 lumber under here. So this is an angled cut. I think I did a 15-degree angle on the backrest. I always like to use a brush when I'm doing glue joints, so I can really spread it around in the corners and stuff like that. Get it out evenly. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and start putting some glue on this leg block. And okay. Alright, so what I'm doing is I'm using a pipe clamp to glue my stretcher together, and I'm actually going to put one on both sides so it glues up evenly, because if you just do it on one side, it's going to want to clamp to one direction, and you want everything nice and square. So I'm going to flip this and put a clamp on the other side. Alright, so I'm staggering and alternating my clamps, one on both sides of the leg so it doesn't glue it crooked. You got even clamping pressure on both sides of the leg, which makes for a very nice tight joint. So you want glue oozing out of there. So I'll get a wet glue brush and a rag and clean that up.
There you go.
So there you go. We did some work in the shop today, showing you some quick examples how to do mortise and tenon joints using just your basic everyday shop equipment. Table saw, bandsaw, plunge router, and cutting your links on the chop saw, and of course your hammer and chisel. So I hope these tips were useful for you, so it can be more productive, do them cleanly, fast, and still holding that old tradition of the mortise and tenon joinery, beautifying your piece, making it strong, lasting decades, centuries. So thank you for coming here today, and keep on crafting.